On behalf of V School, the CII HRM Committee Western Zone, it is our pleasure that we are launching this unique platform. A few words before I hand you over to Dr. Mehrotra. Why this initiative? As you probably know, most of the cases that we teach in various B schools and other settings, most of the cases have been written from outside India, largely with a Western perspective. And we are all aware of the contribution of Harvard Business School's cases across the world. So here I think is an opportunity for us to contribute in some way to build the case study development from the Indian and the eastern part of the world, because in management, as you all know as much as I know, there is no one way of looking at problems and opportunities. So this is a small contribution in that direction. Second case study is a proven methodology of bringing in the real life situation into the classroom. Probably the only better instrument is the simulation, but sometimes simulations are expensive. So case study is a powerful instrument to help students apply the concepts and the frameworks that they learn. And application of knowledge is very important for managers to be competent in doing their job. Thirdly, most cases are very interesting when it is around what is known as dilemmas or decision dilemmas. There is no one way the case protagonist or the actors in the case have chosen a particular way, but there are always many other ways of reaching the same destination. So it's very interesting in hindsight to look at what actually happened and what could have happened. So in a way, the student is put into a situation of being in the hot seat of making decisions in areas where there is more gray than black and white. So one of the reasons why CII has supported this webinar and given us this opportunity in V School to make this presentation is that we believe that many people who want to write cases, they give it up because it seems to be a very tall order. There's very little support. There's very little encouragement. So we thought that the least we can do as an institution who also believes in case development and writing is to offer this webinar so that any one of you or some of you or even more people who are still considering to join this platform and competition, they can be assured of some sort of peer level support and guidance depending on how to craft the case. So with these few words, I am done. I'll come back during the question and answers, but I'm very happy to pass on the baton to Professor Dr. Sonia Mehrotra, who is much more deeply in this space, and it's my pleasure to hand over the session to her. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Vijayan. Good morning, everyone. This is Sonia joining in from V School Bangalore campus. For next couple of minutes, I think Snehada, you need to put the main slides on. Okay, to begin with, for the next couple of minutes, I would be taking you through the mechanics of case writing for a targeted international publishing. To give you a snapshot of what we would be discussing, it would go something like this. Snehada, the next slide, please. The session will talk about what is a teaching case, as well what a teaching case is not. How does writing a case summary helps? Components in a case draft, and the usual case conventions to be followed for acceptance at international publishing houses. It will have a little brief on how you submit for publication, and finally the components of a good teaching note. Now, what is a teaching case? A kind of briefer has already been given by Professor Vijayan, but just to reiterate some of his points, a teaching case is said to be a vehicle designed to convey specific information in an integrated manner. Usually it is oriented around a problem or a decision focus, or simply to say a dilemma as faced by the protagonist of the case. A well-written teaching case enables student and instructor involvement, provided a good case discussion is facilitated by the instructor. A case as a teaching tool is a self-discovery pedagogy. That is to say that every time the student is put in the shoes of a protagonist to provide a solution. And they provide these solutions based on the data that has been mapped in the case document. Now, the case analysis is not about getting to the right or a wrong answer. It is more about understanding the approach to the problem, which in turn helps to develop the critical and analytical competencies that are required for an individual decision making. To give you a brief of different sources of case data, there is something called field research case, which is typically based on interviews in the host organizations. We have desk research case, which are based on company reports, newspaper or magazine articles. And there is this category of armchair cases, which are typically fictional cases and are based on writers' own experience. In this competition category, we are actually looking for field research cases, that is the cases which are based on interviews in your host organizations. Moving on to understand that as case writers, we must also know what a case is not. Most of us come from a research background, and we need to understand that case is not a piece of research. That is to say that you do not really discover a company or a situation while writing a case. It's already there. In case writing, you may not report the objectivity facts entirely. Cases can be disguised, time can be compressed. Some facts you may decide to leave in the case. Though the cases are not really able to replace the practical experience, but they do add to a certain extent to practical exercises, which ultimately helps towards perspective building for the participant audience. Moving on to the case writing section. Now, in my personal opinion, it is suggested that before you start writing a case, put together a 2-page case summary with the following pointers of introduction, background, business model, external environment, and teaching objective. Putting these together will help you with a lot of clarity in terms of what you want to write and kind of enable a smooth rollout of your case. To tell you, introduction should talk about the protagonist, his problem, and the decision focus of the case. The background should give a small brief of the company, its products, its offerings. The business model section can detail the business model of the company. You could also think of putting a line diagram together depicting the business model. And the external environment section should capture the external environment scenario in terms of either consumer preferences or industrial norms or competitors. It could be either of them or all of them, whichever is has relevance to your case. Teaching objectives, if you can write 3 to 4 learning objectives that you can get by using the particular case, it helps. Again, the point to be noted is that writing a case summary is not mandatory, but investing time in doing so goes a long way in developing an excellent case study. Now, this section of the presentation talks about the components of a good case draft. And to tell you on the components, you should have an impressive and attractive title, a good opening paragraph, background which forms the body of the case, conclusion section, and a section which details the exhibits, and we will also see the relevance of footnotes and endnotes. Let me give you a brief about each of these components. The title. The title has an impact on marketing the case. It is used on the web pages, in email marketing, in print advertising, in public relation placements, and is typically the primary identifier of the case. The typical limitation on the number of words to be used for the title should be 10 words or even fewer than that. The words chosen for the title should be a combination of the name of the company featured in the case as well the crux element of the case. I'll just give you an example here. In one of my publications, which was a case on Robert Bosch Engineering and Business Solutions, which is one of the 6 subsidiaries of Robert Bosch in India, the challenge was to use the name of the company in the title along with some catching words that could relate to the problem depicted in the case. Finally, we came up with the title as Robert Bosch India, Plotting a Growth Strategy. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the words Robert Bosch are important if a global search is being done on your case. India again was an important because it conveyed that this case is based as in emerging economy as India. And finally, the words plotting a growth strategy could convey that it is a strategy-oriented case. So as to say, you should have a strategy in choosing the title of the case. It goes a long way. The next pointer here is in terms of understanding what should come in the opening paragraph. The opening paragraph is an opening window and should be able to pull the readers into the role of the protagonist. The 5 important W's in this section to be addressed are when, who, where, what, and why. When talks about the time or the position time in the case. Who identifies the major actors and their positions. Where identifies the firm, its location and type of business. What basically is the statement of the problem or the trigger in the case. Why talks about brief reasoning on the statement of the problem. The point is that this paragraph should be able to provide motivation for the reader to read on. It is, so as to say, a hook upon which you would hang the data that comes next in your case. The opening paragraph typical length is about a page or a page and a half. Next section on this is the background of the case. Snehada, the next slide, yeah. So the background of the case is the body of the case, which should extend from 3 to 7 pages. The background should detail everything about the company, the industry, the competitors, the challenges, the options the protagonist has. Now, it's important that you present your information in chronological order. You may use more than one subheading to define these information. You must identify company's major products and services. Include enough background information for the reader to analyze the decision point. It could be information with regards to revenue, profits, any other financial information if you think it's important for analysis. You may also consider depicting the culture of the company if it is required so. You can also include important challenges and responsibilities of the company, include portion of protagonist's career relevant to the current situation, somehow try to bring in the degree of urgency that is involved in decision making or the timeline of decision making, and typically try and conclude the background section with the alternatives that were available to the protagonist. Once you are done with the background, which should be limited to maximum of 7 pages, we come to the conclusion section of the case draft. Now, this conclusion section again should be max of half a page to 1 page. It should revisit the problem that you had presented in your intro paragraph. Employing narrative devices to create the emotional connect with the reader helps here. This section typically should end with the questions the protagonist will be asking himself, and these are the questions that need to be answered during the case analysis discussion. Another important thing in writing a case draft is the role of the exhibits, endnotes, and footnotes. Now, exhibits come towards the end of the case, and they play an important role in conveying information that may provide the relevant details about the company, the structure, the finances, the products and services. Make sure you include only the relevant exhibits. Unnecessary exhibits should not be included in the case just for the sake of it. Try and limit pictorial exhibits because that increases the size of your file and it's difficult in distribution. There might be some exhibits on industrial information which may need copyright permissions. For example, if you're using some kind of industry data from a McKinsey quarterly report, one way to do it is you pick up the chart as it is and present it as an exhibit in the case. In this case, when you go for publishing, they'll ask you to take permissions from the McKinsey to publish this. The other way around, if it is difficult for you to take permissions, is you can pick up the data which is available in the report and create the exhibit yourself. In this scenario, you don't really need to go for permissions. But of course, you need to indicate a byline indicating its source. So in this case, you can actually put the source as compiled by author based on the data from table 1 of McKinsey report, volume so-and-so, and basically saying that it was created by the author. So as to say that every exhibit that you put in your report, in your case document, should have a byline indicating from which source it is coming. Either it would come from some of the company document as a source, or it would come from some newspaper article or a report or something like this. Endnotes and footnotes. Different publishing houses have, Snehada, you need to move on the slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so endnotes and footnotes play a critical role in writing the cases. Now, different publishing houses have different norms. Some of them prefer endnotes as well as footnotes. Some of them say put all the information in endnotes, and there are some others who talk about put everything in footnotes. The difference between the endnotes referencing style and the footnote referencing style is typically that endnotes are used when you are trying to refer to an industry report or a newspaper article, whereas a footnote typically describes a terminology or technical term. I have an example listed here. Suppose my case has a term called Mechatronic automotive products. Now, not everyone who reads the case may understand what is this Mechatronic automotive product. So I would put a footnote while writing the case, and I would say Mechatronic automotive product design includes a combination of mechanical, electrical, telecommunication, control, and computer engineering concepts. So that's the kind of a difference, whereas an endnote is typically used for referencing a newspaper or a magazine articles. Coming back to our competition, we have asked you to do all referencing in the form of footnotes alone. Yeah, so there are certain, typical case writing conventions. Snehada, next slide. Okay, before we go to case writing conventions, let me share with you, which might be useful for you, as some tips on case writing. It is important in case writing that how you tell the story. You got to provide relevant information that the protagonist had at the time of the issue. Try and present more than one side of the story so that discussion is enabled in many directions. Try and make it come alive by using quotations from different stakeholders of the case. If possible and if required for your case analysis, provide quantitative data and financial statements as well. Moving on, we talk about the case writing conventions. The typical things that need to be done while writing a case is you got to use simple and clear English. When you are introducing an individual or an actor in the case, for the first time initially you got to put his full name. After that you use only the family name. So if it's and then you write the case typically in past tense because you are writing about something that has already occurred. You must not have any kind of titles as Dr., Miss, Mr., Professor, anything of that sort used in the case writing. You got to write neutrally without providing opinion. Any term, next slide. So you got to write neutrally without providing your personal opinion. That bias should not come in the case. Any term that you think can be abbreviated should be done after first time it being written in the full form. So if you're writing something on public sector banks, you can actually write so-and-so public sector bank, and in the bracket you can put it as PSU. And later on in the body of your case, whenever you have to refer to a public sector bank, you can use PSU. But it is important that first time you give the full form always. Keep in mind the international audience. Typical differences are in terms of the nomenclature of currency. International publishing does not accept lakhs, crores. You got to use millions, billions, and things like that. Any analysis or lessons that you think can be learned from the case should not form part of the case. It should typically form the part of the teaching note. The key thing that one needs to understand that case is not just a good story, or neither it is a marketing tool for the company. You got to have a decision focus which revolves around a problem, and that should connect to some kind of a generic management concept learning. Even before you submit for publication, it's advisable that you do classroom testing of your case that's written. Basically, a classroom testing, when you run the case in one of your session, it gives you an idea of what worked well and what did not. It helps you identify the missing pieces that you think that information should be added in the case document. If possible, if you can invite the protagonist to provide the first-hand information towards the end of the case discussion in the class session, it also brings up different perspectives which later you can add on to the case. So once you have done classroom testing and you will have some information there, you basically get prepared to submit for publication. You got to make necessary changes in terms of case and the teaching note. You may require another round of language editing and formatting. And most important, for a field research case, you got to get the company consent. You got to get the formal sign-off from the company for all the data that has been used in the case. For this competition as well, since the focus is on field research cases. Company consent document is very important for a valid submission. So with this, we finish with what really needs to go as components of a case draft. We can discuss more if there are any questions at a later stage. Now we come to this section on teaching note. Teaching note, or the instructor's manual as it is called, is a very important document that needs to be submitted with the case. And the typical things that should get covered in a teaching note is the case synopsis. So case synopsis is that captures the essence of the case in short, maybe to a max of 700 words. It talks about who the protagonist is, what the company is about, what is the triggered problem there, what are the options available, and what is the dilemma the protagonist is facing. So you got to capture all that in max of 700 words. The teaching and the learning objectives are same if you have written a case summary before starting a case draft, and they help you identify as to what are the teaching objectives you're trying to achieve by putting this case document together. Target audience is a very important thing to define while writing a teaching note. So when I say target audience, what typically I mean is that for which level of course or for which level of audience you're trying to put this case together. Is it undergrad level? Is it graduation or post-graduation, or for an executive education kind of a program? Depending upon the target audience, you may want to build a certain level of complexity in the case. It would be different if you have positioned your case for a target audience of undergraduates vis-a-vis if you are trying to teach that case to an executive education program audience. Now, position in the course is about defining the discipline of the case. So it could be an entrepreneurship, marketing, HR, strategy, anything like that. But here in this competition, since this is an HR case writing competition, probably what you can define is that to what typical paper it talks about. Is it talent acquisition related case? Is it a performance appraisal or an industrial relations or an organization change management kind of a case? So probably that is what you need to put under position in the course in this particular submission. Relevant and suggested readings is all about articles that you feel can be read along with this case. These could be newspaper articles, any kind of standard journal articles which basically have similar concept being taught or give insights into the similar concept that is being taught through your case. So the typical referencing style, you just need to detail the article in an Harvard referencing style with the author name coming in the beginning, followed by the name of the article, the journal source, volume, and things like that. The assignment questions is what you got to define will be taught through this case. So minimum of 3 to 4 assignment questions and maximum of 7. Beyond that, it's not suggested. The teaching plan typically should talk about for a 75-minute session or for a 90-minute session, how would you as an instructor like to roll out the case. So how much time in terms of minutes you would like to devote to each section of the case. You must provide suggested and possible answers to the assignment questions that you have given in the case. And this is important because any other person who's going to teach your case gets an insights into what the case writer had in his mind when he was trying to put this case together. Now, you could also have some kind of board plans or slides or suggested teaching methods. So board plans are typically, again, in terms of teaching note exhibits which talk about how would you like to open the case, which section you will do, how will you relate one part of the case to the other part. So you could give some kind of a pictorial, diagram there. It could also be in form of a PowerPoint slide that you would want. And suggested teaching method could be anything. If you want, if you think a role play in this case helps, probably you could mention that as one of your plans. And then you have this last section called what happened section. So what happened section is an optional section. You may or you may not put it in your teaching note. And typically this section talks about in reality what actually the protagonist did. So remember your introduction spoke about the decision focus or the problem. And then you ended the concluding paragraph saying, once again, revisiting the problem, and then you left it open for case discussion. So while you have a case discussion, there could be different perspectives that come from the students, but this what happened section actually details that what the entrepreneur or the company protagonist actually did to solve the problem. So again, it's an optional section. You may take a call if you want to put it together or not. Now, teaching note is the backbone of a good case study, and many a times we tend to start the teaching note once we have finished the case draft. But it is suggested that you think through the teaching note while you're writing the case, because it is very important that you have enough information put together in the case for a good case discussion to happen. And that is why I suggested that if you write a case summary initially, it does help. And yes, this is all from my side. Thank you and good luck. And we do hope to see some real good case contributions. And Snehada, I think we are now open for the question and answer sessions.